Remember how everybody wanted to play this card, play the deck, have him on his team, and just win with it? Well, unfortunately, he's considered washed up, so I guess it's time to say goodbye to him and say hello to Mr. Varga Dragres, your new best friend for Dragon Empire, and bring him his best girl as well. Hello guys, welcome to another deck profile brought to you by Petraz from Lootville TCG. In this case, we have a very special one since we're going a bit further into the future compared to the English meta. Well, we have the Faded One of Unparalleled, Dragres Varga, my favorite boy now, who has replaced good old Shiranui for the time being until he maybe finally gets off the ban list sometime soon. But yeah, currently this is one of my favorite decks to play in Vanguard. For one, very cool card, but two, best girl, man, best girl. She's done a lot great things in the anime, so hopefully she does more. But for now, let's just get onto the deck profile and see what this deck does, what tech it has, what lines of plays maybe, and yeah, we'll see what happens. But first off, before we get into that, energy. We should discuss a bit about energy, because I believe some people would be very interested to know how energy works, especially with the recent Vanguard demos that have been going around across the globe. Excuse me for that. But yeah, this is gonna be a very important part of Vanguard in the coming future, unless they phase it out, but we'll never know about that. So in this case, how the energy marker works is that whenever you start a game, and whenever you ride up to your grade 1, if you're going first, you get this marker, which allows you to gain energy, which are, you know, these things. Good old Vanguard cards with potentially your favorite character in the back. No reason why, no reason particular why I chose this one. But besides that, if you go second, you get free energy. If you go first, you get nothing, but that's how Vanguard's been going these days. Go second, you gain a lot of benefits. And then every time you, before you ride up, you get an additional free energy. So that's how you accumulate energy. And additionally, if you're a deck that doesn't play energy, you just, what is it? Energy Blast 7 away. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You get to draw 1. But if you're playing a deck that uses energy, like good old Mr. Varga right here with his side character, side girl, you won't be using that draw often unless you brick really hard. So yeah, that's just energy in a nutshell. And of course, you will need either a counter that can count you energy right here. Usual energy counter, you'll find these in the start decks they'll be bringing out. Or if you want to be a bit more fancy, you know, not use the normal one, you can use these cool metal energy counters provided by My Metal Cards from on the Etsy page. And honestly, these are really nice, very good quality, hard metal. And yeah, just a very nice design. Here I do have the Dragon Empire, I also have the Lyrical and the Dark States as well. So honestly, if you do want to, you know, bling out a bit more on your decks, these are really nice to get. And they also have a special energy counter. I know I felt this when I viewed a lot of games at Melbourne Springfest this year, so yeah, maybe one of you guys might really want this in case, you know. But besides that, if you want to do some extra bling that's on energy markers, you also have these nation cards as well. You know, we have Keter here, Stoicheia, and Brandgate. Just really nice to bling out your decks, so hopefully you can either buy these ones or the energy markers. So, do supports My Metal Cards I believe you can use some 6 damage shield to get a percentage off. I don't remember from the top of my head, but hopefully you guys do support them because they do some great work. But now let's get on to the deck profile with the ride line. Great ride line, actually. I do like this ride line. Although this guy has caused me a couple of issues in the past. You still charge OT too much, but oh well. So let's talk about the main grade 3 Varga Dragres. So this guy is basically Overlord in disguise, essentially, but with the potential to do a third attack based on its divine skill. The first skill is basically on attack, I believe, or end the battle. No, it should be on attack. You counterburst 1, you wipe both front rows, so both yourself and your opponents. It gets 10k, and then at the end of that battle, you will restand it to give minus 2 drive as well. So basically just do a twin drive into no drive. Pretty simple, pretty standard stuff. Hits 23 by itself. If you do extra things with it, it might get bigger. We'll discuss that later. But its divine skill, the most, I guess, important part of it, is basically whenever you attack with Varga twice, at the end of that second battle, if your opponent has 4 more damage, so basically they be on limit break, you counterburst 1, you restand Varga, and you get 2 drives back, which is basically you go from twin, 0, twin drive, which honestly is always fun to do. Of course, divine skills are only once per turn, but you know, if you're able to kill your opponent during your divine turn skill, doesn't really matter what happens after that, right? So, cool guy, and of course, I had to get him in secret, which dealt a massive blow to my wallet, but that's a different discussion entirely. So, for the grade 2 of the ride line, we have Boulder Axe Dragon. It's actually a really great card. Basically what it does is that when you ride Varga on top of it, you get to call it out. Free rearguard from Soul, who can complain? Additionally, with its second skill, which does synergize pretty well with Varga, is that at the when it attacks, if you have a Varga on the Vanguard, which is grade 3 or higher, you give it 5k, and then at the end of the battle, it will retire itself to draw you 1. So, if you remember that Varga retires both front row rear guards, both yourself and your opponent, this is a great way to get resources back without actually losing much. So, great card, and you'll see him in the deck as well. We go to the grade 1, which unfortunately I do not remember its name, which I should. But this guy is basically a nice rear guard attacker. Essentially, when you ride the Boulder Axe on top of him, you get to call him out and you soul charge 1. So it becomes a AKB stick on the rear guards, and you know, early rush is very good, especially in this deck, because the goal is basically to get your opponent to 4 life. If you can't get them to 4 life, you can't use divine skill, right? Do note that the soul charge is mandatory, which is why I say it has caused me issues by soul charging OT a lot more than I expected, but you know what? Sometimes that happens, it's part of the game. Additionally, its second skill is, if you have a Varga that's grade 3 or higher in the Vanguard circle, gets 2k, so late game it can become a 10k booster or 10k attacker, and you know, all around, not bad, grade 1. And grade 0, normal grade 0. I just got this guy from Japan, pretty much. Good old FR, basically any grade 0 you want. If it wasn't this guy, it could have been this, but you know what, we'll go with a bit more fancy in this deck. So that's basically the ride line. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, nothing complex, which basically describes the deck in a nutshell. So why not we get into the deck itself. Starting off with running some Vargas, Persona rides, of course. I got these in SIR, because I'm a big fan of the FFRs, but personal choice, personal preference, you guys decide what you want to buy, right? But basically, Persona rides always necessary in any deck. Most of the time, I can't think of a deck that would not use Persona rides, unless you're trying some very weak builds, but generally, max out the copies of your Persona rides. We do run the cup as well. 4th Persona ride is very good. You can never say wrong. You can never say no to that. There are builds that use the Bracing Angel Ladder to give the 5k to Vanguard, and your whole board becomes non-targetable. Which does help on the Persona Ride turn, where you Persona Ride and then you use the ladder. You have a 38k restanding Vanguard, but I do prefer the consistency of having the additional Persona Ride, because sometimes you might never actually see these, but you do see this, so it does come up, pretty much. Next is this guy, the Grade 3 Rearguard for Varga. He's actually pretty good, in all honesty. He's a 23k beatstick by himself, non-Persona Ride turns. Persona Ride would be 33k. Also, he is not affected by the retire skills of your Varga, so whenever Varga does use his skill, you don't retire to Grade 3, which is actually very helpful, because then you can put triggers on it, and in case your Varga doesn't do a lot with the triggers, you can just put in the Rearguard, and hopefully you can do more things with it. Additionally, if you don't want it as a front row attacker, because your field might be set up in a different way, it can be a 13k booster as long as you have Varga in the Vanguard, so pretty much all around a very nice card to have. Potentially he might be the one that gets kicked out in the future, but for the time being, for set 1, he's pretty much necessary. Very good card. In a nutshell. So that's a Grade 3s. Pretty straightforward, pretty standard stuff, I must say. We get to the Grade 2s. Boulder Axe Dragons, I maxed them out in the deck because honestly, who doesn't want a beater that can replace himself and just keep allowing you to go through your deck, which is always great. You always want to go through your deck to get pieces. We have 4 of the side girl for Varga, I would say. This girl is basically how you do extra multi-attacks in the deck, and she combos with Varga's skill. Essentially, she has 2 skills. One is on attack, you would do a Energy Blast 2, and what she does is that she gets 5k for herself. Additionally, you can choose one of your other rearguards, and whenever that other rearguard gets retired, you just bring it back to hand. So, for example, you swing with her, you have Boulder Axe on the other side, you can Energy Blast, give the Boulder Axe the ability where if it gets retired, you just bring it back to hand. So, combos really well with the deck. There's also other pieces in the deck where if they get retired, they can do self-retire, or in any case, sometimes you might just call a random rearguard here. It can't retire itself, but because Varga retires it, you can just bounce it back to hand. So, very, very good cards. Additionally, for the multi-attacking part, whenever herself, when she gets retired, you will Counterblast 1 and call back to the rearguard, as long as your opponent's Vanguard is Grade 3 or higher. And she gets 10k as well, so on a normal turn, she'll just be a 15k by herself. Then when she gets retired, she'll get called back as a 20k, so pretty good attacker. Obviously, if a booster behind, can become much bigger as well. So definitely a mandatory card in Varga, which is why she's run at 4. And the last one is this Grade 2 Cycler that every nation got in set 1. The first skill was always the same with him. Whenever you put this on the Guardian Circle, or when you ditch it, for rides, potentially, or ditch, you get to Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3 to draw 1. So basically, he replaces the Conflagon from the older sets from set 10, and basically allows you to just keep filtering through the deck, which is always great. Additionally, if you need some extra shield, you can just use those unspent energy cards that you have, and just, draw 1, place more guard. Very versatile card. Its second ability is a bit more not as interesting compared to the other ones, I would say. 2000 cycles in the set, but it actually works pretty well with Varga. So, when you're on a Persona Ride turn, if you call this to rearguard, you get to Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3 to basically call a Grade 1 of your choice from your drop onto the Battlefield, which is pretty great actually, because this deck has quite a lot of grade 1s based on how the deck runs. Because as I said before, you want to rush early, which is the deck needs. So once you go through those grade 1s, you just call them back with this card, and yeah, that's how it goes. You can use her to return him back to hand if you require the additional shield later on in the game. So honestly, he's very versatile, and probably a mandatory 4 as well in the deck for the time being. Now that's grade 2's done. Let's get into the grade 1s, because this is where things get a bit more interesting. So in my deck, I run 3 each of these grade 1s. Honestly, most builds just use, say, 3 of them, or maybe use some other grade 1s, but in this case, I just want to use all 4 because they are pretty nice to have all around. So let's start with the Dragres, the guy that goes to Soul. So essentially, this guy does is that if you play some Rearguard Soak, he just gets 5k for the turn, so he becomes a 11k beat stick, booster, whatever you want. Early game, if you have your, so for example, the Ride Line grade 1, you get to have him in the front row, have this guy in the back row. That's a 19k column, which is a magic number if you go first or second row. If you go first, go second, they get a trigger that doesn't really hit the same, but obviously still not bad to hit with, pretty much. Additionally, what this guy does is that he also goes to Soul as a replacement cost for when you want to ride up and ditch, which honestly is helpful, especially since he just tucks himself away and gives a bit of soul to yourself, which does play a part in the deck. Because of this guy, the Varga grade 1, I'll call him, because I don't remember these names. So this guy is basically Varga's personal booster. He makes Varga a lot bigger by giving him extra power. So the first skill is if you have a Varga Vanguard, that's grade 3. This unit gets 5k, which is great. You know, 30k booster is always good. Its second skill also gets a bit of power when you're boosting a Varga Vanguard, that's grade 3. It gets 2k, so normally you just put this behind Varga, it becomes a 15k booster, which honestly, who can complain, right? You have him, that's already 23 by himself, combined with 15, that's 38k. Not bad to push with. And then at the end of battle, that it boosted, you just Soul Blast 1, retire itself, and you get to draw 1. So it replaces itself so you can keep digging through the deck, and this is where the soul from the Dragres guy becomes semi-important, but in the course of the game you should not run out of soul, but if you do, that's where this guy comes in early game. But yeah, very good booster for Varga. Most lists I've seen play 4 because they want to see him, but because I run these other 2, you don't need him as much since these guys do basically the same thing, just with slightly different conditions. So let's go with the other grade 1s. I believe this guy's mid-hat from memory. Essentially, when your Vanguard restands, you just retire it, draw 1. Very simple effect, very easy to use in this deck, and it just helps you filter through the deck. Same with, I believe, your Brunei. So essentially, at the end of battle that this boosted, if any rearguard, I believe your opponent's rearguards, or any players, don't remember the wording, was retired during this turn, you just bind it, and then you get to draw 1. So just more draw power in the deck. All these grade 1s are basically fueled by Varga. Besides him, he just does his own thing, but basically these main 3 grade 1s is how you get to power through your deck, keep drawing cards, make sure you see pieces. Most of the time, you would just, as I said before, you might just run it like this, and you just increase these by 1 more, or increase these by 1 more. Or you might do something like this, so increase this by 1, and keep this at 3, or etc. So the grade 1 slot is versatile, but also pretty simple in what it does. It's basically a choice of what do you think you'll face in the meta, and what is your playstyle. Because remember, if you are rushing, you might need to call these grade 1s early. So depending on how it goes, you get to decide which grade 1 lineup you want to do. Especially since we are getting new grade 1 in set 2, but that's for another future discussion. So yeah, that's the grade 1 in a nutshell. Let's get to the more mundane stuff. PGs, standard stuff. Can't complain about these PGs. Triggers as well. Blue OT, probably the easiest OT to use in the deck. If you think you're going to high roll, you can use Dragon Empire OT, but that requires too much luck to go on, so simple. Blue OT is the easiest one to use. For the other triggers, I run a crit. Of course, your resetting deck. Crits are always a must-have in a deck like that, or in a deck like this, otherwise you can't push hard. So yeah, pretty explanatory. So, if you know, you know. Free draws. As I said before, you want to keep going through the deck, because that's how the deck operates with all those grade 1s and grade 2s that also draw the deck. So, draws basically help that strategy as well. And 4 heals. These heals can be anything you want, in all honesty. You can either restand, crit. If you want to be a bit more spicy, you can use those stride crits, stride heals. When your opponent's like high grade, you can use those, but honestly, normal heals work out fine. You don't need the special heals. So yeah, that's basically my deck in a nutshell. Pretty standard stuff, nothing too complex. I guess we can show off a couple of combos. Basically, what do you do when you ride up, and basically what you do when you ride up, and what you do on subsequent turns. Although to be fair, this deck is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So the combos aren't complex, but it's just more of, you know, what do you want to do, pretty much on each turn. So let's say we start from the grade 1. If you ride up and say, for example, you are going second, usually you do want a additional grade 1 to help you push. Best one would either be the guy that goes to Soul, or Varga's boosting grade 1. So you can make a 16k column, or you can make a 19k column going second. I think we all know that 19k hits over 8k easily as a magic number, so pretty much this is probably the best one to get. And remember, you do want to rush and push, so if you do have any additional grade 1s in hand, for example, maybe mid-hat, you can call them as a rear guard and just bash, and then bash. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward rush mentality, so nothing too hard to think about. Just make sure you have grade 1, so mulligan-wise, you may want to mulligan for a lot more grade 1s in hand, just so you can keep up the pressure going on. If you do play the deck and you experience that you may have low hand at the beginning, that's fine. You will just replenish that back once you get to grade 3 and the rest, as you keep going through the turns. For grade 2, follow the similar mentality pretty much, especially since this grade 1 gets called out, so basically just push again, rush. If you have additional grade 1s, you can call them out, like so. This is probably one of my more favorite formations to have, 18k and 19k, especially if you're going first. Going second, the numbers are a bit more muddled since they're on the 10k base, and you can't really reach 20k that easily on second turn unless you call a grade 2. What is a grade 2? For example, maybe herself. Then you want to call her just to get a 21k column so you can keep bashing. Then you need to commit something else here. We'll just use you as a random example. So if you want to rush, you just rush. And remember, some of these cards will draw you cards. Well, not this one. Well, Boulder Axe will eventually draw you as long as you get to grade 3. Now, on the grade 3 turn, when you ride Varga, assuming that you do have this guy out, he might just stay out. You just call the Boulder Axe to rearguard. This makes a 25k column by itself, which is very useful, especially if they're on 10k base. If they're on the 13k base, still fine, still works out. And this is where you also want some of those grade 1s as well. So currently we have this, maybe a mid hat if we were able to get to it, and maybe this grade 3 if we get to it as well. So attack patterns are very, very normal. You want to use your rear guards that if they retire themselves, they will draw you cards, or if it's the girl, you can attack with her as well. So basically rear guards first. This guy would usually swing last or between your Vanguard restand. So depending how he goes, you can do that. But essentially Varga should be the last one to attack from all of your rear guards as long as they are not retired or not retireable or anything. So you just swing, swing, swing. Standard stuff. And not much else to say in honesty. Very simple deck. You've played Overlord before, and if it's variants, it's kind of the same mentality, except you have a bit more card draw, or at least you're able to dig through the deck a lot easier. So that's basically Varga. I don't think there's much else to say. Weaknesses. I think we can talk about weaknesses of the deck, because that is something that Varga can face, which is damage deny. Because remember, your resend ability is based off Counterblast. If you don't have Counterblast, the deck kind of shuts down in a way for like a turn, unless they start pushing you again. So be mindful of Counterblast's usage, especially don't spam this girl too much. You might want to use her maybe once a turn. There are turns where you might have to use her, like say, for example, 2 of her on the battlefield, and you have to use both of them in order to push really hard. But most of the time, I think just having some other random reguard on the sides, the grade 3, a Boulder Axe, or even your Cycle grade 2, those are completely fine to push with. But essentially make sure that your Counterblast usage gets monitored, otherwise you will run out of steam pretty quickly, and then you'll just lose because you can't really do much besides Persona running. There are ways to countercharge in this deck if you run those options, but personally I think those options don't do enough for the deck itself. It's fancy, very nice, but doesn't do enough, essentially. I think we just want to add some extra tech options in the deck. For example, you have this guy, you have a Conflagon if you want to use him, and you can use Brachio as well. I think the tech options really come from the grade 2s. The grade 1s are pretty set in stone, there's not much to really change, and let's go for a more fancy build, but I think if you want to go a bit more on the side with your grade 2s, I think these options are really nice, especially this guy. Very funny to use with your Varga restand. So basically what this guy does, if your opponent has 2 or less rear guards, when your Vanguard attacks, you can just chuck this in the soul, and you give your Vanguards plus 10k for the turn. If it was for the battle, it wouldn't be too good, but for the turn is pretty nice. Very good stuff. Brachio needs no explanation. On hits, retire itself, you draw 1, you retire with your opponent's rear guards. So if you want to use this to snipe something in the back, pretty much always good to have. And you can also combo with her as well, if it really gets down to it, so maybe something people can try out in the future. And Conflagon, basically your Cycler, like this guy, just different costs. This one is a Soul Blast, this one's just Counter Blast or Energy Blast, so I would say this is more versatile, especially so you can use them on rear guards. But if for whatever reason you want the extra draw power during your right step, he's not a bad option. There's always slots that you can test out in this deck. But yeah, I think that's basically it for this deck profile of the new Dragon Empire boy, Varga Dragres. Yeah, hopefully you guys do find this deck profile interesting or at least insightful, because you'll definitely see this in future tournaments, future BSFs. Not sure about future BCSs, but yeah, leave a like down below, as people always do with the finger guns, and we'll catch you next time with maybe a new deck profile or new tournaments or a new fight. So see you guys.